My name is Hamid Pourmand, once a proud general raised to pray 5 times a day, but who later found a love so powerful it was worth losing everything. My rank, my home, even my freedom. I wasn't always a Christian. I was born a Muslim, taught to serve Allah and Iran with all my heart, but something was missing, a hole no duty could fill. Then I met Jesus, and he changed everything. I was born in 1958 in Bandar Bushehr, a dusty port city by the Persian Gulf. The air always smelled of salt and fish, and the sun burned so hot you could feel it through your sandals. I was the second of 4 brothers, raised in a small house with a courtyard where my mother hung laundry and prayed. My father ran a shop selling rice and spices, his hands rough from work, but gentle when he ruffled my hair. Hamid, he'd say, be a man of honor. Serve your family, your country, and your God. Those words shaped me like the waves carving the shore outside our home. Our life revolved around Islam. 5 times a day, the call to prayer echoed from the mosque, and my mother would kneel on her prayer rug, her lips moving in quiet devotion. I watched her, trying to feel what she felt. At 8 years old, I learned to pray like her, bowing toward Mecca, reciting the words I was taught. But even then, I felt a stirring, like a whisper I couldn't hear clearly. God felt far away, like a king I was supposed to serve, but never met that I didn't dare say this out loud. In our town, questions about faith could bring shame, or worse, I was a curious boy, always running through the streets, climbing date palms, or chasing my brothers to the water's edge. One day when I was about 10, I slipped into our neighbor's house. His name was Aram, an Assyrian Christian older than my father, with kind eyes. I'd heard whispers about Christians. They were different, strange, not like us. Inside his home, I saw something that stopped me cold, a wooden cross on the wall. It was small and simple, but it felt alive, like it was watching me. What's that? I asked, my voice small. Aram smiled. It's a sign of love, he said. God's love. I didn't understand, but my heart raced. I ran home, scared to tell anyone, but that cross stayed in my mind, a secret I carried like a stone in my pocket. School was strict, and I was a good student, eager to make my parents proud. My father dreamed I'd be more than a shopkeeper, and I wanted to make him smile. By 16, I knew my path. Iran was strong and proud, and the army was calling young men to serve. I saw soldiers in their crisp uniforms marching through town, and I thought, that's who I want to be. I want to protect my country, to be a hero. At 18, I joined the army, my chest swelling with pride as I kissed my mother goodbye. She cried, but her eyes shone with hope. Serve with honor, Hamid, she said. I promised I would. Army life was hard. The desert sun burned my skin during training, and my muscles ached from carrying a rifle for hours. But I loved it. I learned to lead, to command respect. My officers saw something in me, strength, maybe, or stubbornness. By my late 20s, I was an officer, climbing ranks faster than my friends. I stood tall in my uniform, my boots polished, my voice sharp when I gave orders at BY-35. I was a general, leading men who trusted me with their lives. I sent money home, bought my parents a better house, and felt I was living my father's dream. But deep inside, something was wrong. No matter how many medals I earned, no matter how my men saluted, I felt empty day night. Lying in my quarters, I'd stare at the ceiling wondering, is this all there is? I prayed the way I was taught, facing Mecca, reciting the words, but they felt like sand slipping through my fingers. God was supposed to be close, but he felt like a stranger. I started noticing things I hadn't before. My men, mostly Muslim, followed orders, but some seemed hollow like me. Others, a few, were different. There was a young soldier, Raza, who never joined the others at the mosque. One night, I caught him reading a small book under his blanket, his face lit by a flashlight. What's that? I snapped, thinking it was forbidden. He froze, then whispered, it's a Bible, sir. I should have reported him, but his eyes held no fear, only peace. I let him go, but his peace haunted me. What did he have that I didn't? Around this time, I met Arlette. She was an Assyrian Christian, born into a faith I barely understood. I saw her at a market in Bandar Bushehr, her dark hair catching the sun as she bought bread. She smiled at me, and my world stopped. We talked. And I learned she was kind, strong, and unafraid to be different. She spoke of Jesus like he was her friend, not a distant God. He loves us, Hamid, she said once, her voice soft but sure. He died for us. Those words hit me like a bullet. Died? For us? Why would God do that? I didn't understand, but I wanted to. Arlette became my wife, and with her, I felt closer to something true, something bigger than my uniform or my country. We married a year later, in 1986. It wasn't easy. My parents worried about her faith, whispering that a Muslim man should choose a Muslim wife. But I loved Arlette, her strength, her kindness. Our wedding was small, just family and a few friends, the air thick with the scent of jasmine and spice. Arlette wore a simple white dress, her smile brighter than the sun. That night, as we sat in our new home, she did something that shook me. She took my hand, bowed her head, and prayed, Jesus, thank you for Hamid, for our love, for our life. Her words were simple, but they hit me hard. She wasn't praying to a distant God. She was talking to someone she knew. I felt a pang of envy, a longing for that closeness. I wanted to ask her about Jesus, but fear stopped me. What would it mean? To question everything I'd been taught? As a general, my life was order and discipline. I led my men through drills, inspected their rifles, and planned missions along Iran's borders. My days were full, but my nights were restless. I'd lie awake in our small apartment, Arlette sleeping beside me, her breath soft and steady. I'd think about her prayers, about the cross I'd seen as a boy in Aramshaus, and about Raza, the soldier, who read a Bible in secret. I started noticing things. Arlette would read her Bible in the morning, her fingers tracing the words, her face calm. What's in there? I asked once, trying to sound casual. She smiled, her eyes warm. Truth, she said. Want to see? She handed me her Bible, its cover worn from years of love. I took it, my hands shaking like I was holding something forbidden. I hid it in a drawer, afraid my men might see, afraid of what it might do to me. In Iran, Christians were outsiders, whispered about, and sometimes feared. But Arlette wasn't afraid. She spoke of Jesus with a joy that made my chest ache. One night, when Arlette was asleep, I pulled the Bible out. The apartment was quiet, just the hum of crickets outside. I sat at our small table, a single lamp casting shadows on the wall. My heart pounded as I opened it to John's Gospel. The page Arlette had marked, the words jumped out. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. I read it again, then again. Jesus' voice felt alive, like he was sitting across from me, looking into my soul. I'd spent years praying toward Mecca, but those prayers felt like echoes in an empty room. These words were different. They were a promise, a call. I closed the book, my hands trembling. I was a general, a man of strength, but I felt small, like a child lost in the dark. For months, I wrestled. I'd read the Bible in secret, locking my office door at the barracks and hiding it under papers when someone knocked. I read about Jesus's love, his sacrifice, and his resurrection. It was so different from what I'd known. In Islam, I was taught to submit, to follow rules, and to earn God's favor. But Jesus said, "Come to me, all you who are weary, and I will give you rest." Matthew 11 verse 28, rest. I wanted that. I was tired of pretending, tired of the emptiness. But becoming a Christian wasn't just a choice. It was dangerous. In Iran, leaving Islam could mean prison, even death. I thought of Arlette, of our future. What if I lost everything? My rank, my honor, my family's respect? One evening, Arlette caught me reading. I froze, the Bible open on my lap. She didn't say anything, just sat beside me and took my hand. Hamid, she whispered, Jesus is calling you. Don't be afraid. Her words broke something in me. I wanted to believe, but fear was a chain around my heart. What if I'm wrong? I asked, my voice cracking. What if this costs us everything? She looked at me, her eyes full of tears but steady. Jesus is worth it, she said. He's the only truth. I wanted to argue, to cling to the faith I'd known, but her certainty shook me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing her words, feeling Jesus's pull like a tide drawing me to shore. In 1990, everything changed. I was sent on a mission to a remote base near the border. The nights were cold, the stars sharp in the sky. One night, alone in my tent, I couldn't take it anymore. I fell to my knees, the dirt rough under me, and prayed, not to Allah, but to the God I didn't yet know. If you're real, I whispered, Shom, I'm lost. I need you. Tears burned my eyes, and I felt foolish, a grown man crying like a boy. I fell asleep exhausted, my heart heavy. That night, I had a dream. I was standing in a field, the wind soft, the air warm. A man stood before me, his face kind, his eyes like fire and love mixed together. He wore a white robe, and his presence filled me with peace I'd never known. Hamid, he said, his voice gentle but strong, follow me. I knew it was Jesus. I fell to my knees in the dream, sobbing, not from fear, but from joy. He touched my shoulder, and it was like a weight lifted, like chains breaking. I woke up, my face wet with tears, my heart racing. The tent was dark, but I felt light, like the sun was rising inside me. I knew in that moment that Jesus was the truth, the only way to God. I whispered, I'm yours, and it felt like coming home. Asterisk the next morning, I felt different. The world looked sharper, the colors brighter. I wanted to shout, to tell everyone, but I knew I couldn't. Iran wasn't safe for converts. I told Arlette when I returned home. She cried, hugging me so tight I could barely breathe. I've been praying for this, she said, her voice shaking. We knelt together, and she prayed, thanking Jesus for calling me. I felt his love through her, through the words we spoke. But fear lingered. What would this mean for us? For my career? For our future? I found a pastor in Bandar Bushehr, a man named Daniel who led a secret house church. He was older, his face lined from years of hiding his faith. I met him in a small room, the windows covered, the air thick with the scent of tea, and feared. He listened to my story, nodding, his eyes kind. Are you ready to follow Jesus, no matter the cost? He asked. I thought of my men, Marank, and my parents' pride. I thought of Arlette, of the dream. Yes, I said, my voice steady for the first time. That night, in a quiet ceremony, he baptized me in a tub of water behind closed doors. As the water ran down my face, I felt clean and new, like a soldier given a new mission. I was no longer just General Hamid Pourmand. I was Hamid, a child of God. Asterisk, but joy came with fear. I was a Christian now, but still a general. I had to hide my faith like a secret weapon I couldn't show. I'd pray in my office, whispering psalms under my breath, my door locked. I'd read the Bible at night, hiding it under my pillow when Arlette and I finished. I joined Daniel's house church, where we sang in whispers, always watching the door. Every meeting felt like a risk, but it was worth it. I felt Jesus with me, his love like a fire in my bones. I'd look at Arlette, her face glowing as we prayed, and I'd think, this is what truth feels like. One night at church, I met a young man, a former Muslim like me. His name was Ali, and his hands shook as he told his story. He'd lost his job and his family's respect because he followed Jesus. Why do it? I asked, my voice low. He smiled, tears in his eyes. Because Jesus is real, he said. He's the only one who loves me like this. His words hit me hard. I saw myself in him, the fear, the joy, the choice. I realized then that Jesus wasn't just a belief. He was a person, alive, calling me to love him back. That I went home and held Arlette, tears streaming down my face. He's worth it, I whispered, echoing her words. She nodded, her eyes shining. He always is. As I stood on the edge of this new life, I didn't know the storms were coming. I didn't know I'd lose my rank, my freedom, and my home. But I knew Jesus was with me, and that was enough. My journey was just beginning, and the road ahead would test my faith in ways I couldn't imagine. Asterisk, being a Christian general was like walking a tightrope over a fire. Iran was a place of pride and power, but also suspicion. Christians, especially converts from Islam, were watched, whispered about, and sometimes arrested. I knew the risks. I'd heard stories of men like him, Muslims who turned to Jesus, taken away, their families left in shame. Yet every morning, as I buttoned my uniform, I felt Jesus with me. His words from John 14 verse 6, I am the way, the truth, and the life, were my anchor. They reminded me who I served, even when I stood before my men, barking orders, hiding the fire in my soul. My days were filled with duty. I led patrols along Iran's borders, my Jeep bouncing over rocky roads, dust choking the air. I trained my men to march in perfect lines, their rifles gleaming, their faces hard with determination. I was proud of them, proud to serve my country. But every salute, every command, felt like a mask. I'd walk through the barracks, my boots clicking on the concrete, and wonder, if they knew I followed Jesus, would they still follow me? I was their leader, but I felt alone, carrying a truth I couldn't share. Arlette, my wife, was my refuge. Our small apartment in Bandar Bushehr was a sanctuary where the scent of her cooking, saffron rice and lamb, mixed with the warmth of her prayers. At night, when the world was quiet, we'd kneel together, our hands clasped, whispering to Jesus, "Protect us, Lord." She'd pray, her voice steady but soft. Guide Hamid's steps. I'd watch her, her face glowing in the lamplight, and feel a love so deep it hurt. She was braver than me, unafraid to live her faith even as an Assyrian Christian in a land that didn't trust her. "Jesus is worth it," she'd say when I worried. Her words were a lifeline, pulling me back when fear tried to drown me. Our sons, Emmanuel and David, were my joy and my fear. They were young, just 5 and 3, their laughter filling our home like music. I'd tuck them into bed, their small hands clutching mine, and tell them stories. Sometimes I'd slip in tales of Jesus, the Good Shepherd, the friend who never leaves. "Does Jesus love me?" Emmanuel asked once, his eyes wide. "More than you can imagine," I said, my throat tight that I wanted them to know him, but I was terrified. What if my faith put them in danger? What if they grew up without a father because of my choice? Those thoughts haunted me like shadows in the night. I found strength in our secret church. We met in a basement, the windows covered with blankets, the air thick with the scent of tea and whispered hymns. Pastor Daniel led us, his voice low but full of fire. We'd sing, "What a friend we have in Jesus," our voices barely above a breath, afraid the neighbors might hear. I'd look around at the others, men and women, young and old, all risking everything to worship. There was Sarah, a widow who'd lost her son to prison for his faith. There was Raza, the soldier I'd caught reading a Bible years before, now a brother in Christ. Their courage shamed me. I was a general, used to giving orders, but here I was, just Hamid, a man learning to trust Jesus. One night, I took a risk that changed me. A young soldier under my command, Hussein, came to me after a drill. His face was pale, his hands shaking. "Sir," he whispered, "I need to talk." We went to my office, the door locked, the air heavy. He told me he'd found a Bible in a market, hidden in a stack of old books. He'd been reading it, and it was breaking his heart. "Is Jesus real?" he asked, his voice cracking, but I froze. I could have sent him away, reported him. But I saw myself in Heises, the hunger, the fear. I took a breath, my heart pounding, and said, "Yes, Hussein. He's real. He's the truth." I told him mystery, the dream of Jesus, the peace I'd found. His eyes filled with tears, and he said, "I want that." That night, in a hidden room, I baptized him, pouring water over his head as Pastor Daniel prayed. Hussein wept, and so did I. It was the first time I'd led someone to Jesus, and it felt like the greatest mission of my life. But every step closer to Jesus brought me closer to danger. I started noticing things, soldiers watching me, whispers in the mess hall. Once, during a barracks inspection, an officer found my Bible tucked under a stack of reports. My heart stopped as he held it up, his eyes narrow. "What's this, General?" he asked. That I lied, my voice steady but my insides churning. "A gift from my wife's family," I said. "I keep it for her." He stared at me, then put it down. I walked away, my legs weak, knowing how close I'd come to ruin. That night, I held Arlette and cried. "I'm scared," I admitted. She kissed my forehead. "Jesus is with us," she said. "He's stronger than fear." I wanted to believe her, but the weight of my secret was crushing me. My faith grew, but so did the tension. I'd pray in my office, the door locked, whispering Psalm 23. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." The words were a shield, protecting me from the fear that clawed at my heart. I'd read about Jesus' courage, how he faced death for us, and I'd think, if he could do that, I can keep going. But it wasn't easy. I'd see my men praying at the mosque, their heads bowed, and feel like a stranger. I'd hear my parents talk about Allah, their pride in me as a Muslim soldier, and my heart would ache. I wanted to tell them about Jesus, too, share the joy that filled me, but I couldn't. Not yet. Not when it could break their hearts or put them in danger. Point one moment broke me open. It was 1993, and Emmanuel, my eldest, was 6. He came home from school, his face bruised, his eyes red, from crying. They called me a dirty Christian, he said, his voice small that I held him, my heart shattering. Arlette's faith was known, and our boys were paying the price. I wanted to protect them, to shield them from the world's hate. That night, I prayed harder than ever, tears streaming down my face. Jesus, why is this so hard? I asked. Why do my sons suffer for my faith? I felt his presence, not in words, but in a peace that settled over me like a warm blanket in the cold. I realized then that following Jesus wasn't just about joy. It was about carrying a cross, just as he did. I looked at Emmanuel sleeping, his small chest rising and falling, and vowed to teach him Jesus' love, no matter the cost. The risks grew. In 1994, I heard about a pastor in Another City arrested for sharing the gospel. He was gone, his family left, with nothing. I knew it could be me. I started being more careful, avoiding certain soldiers and checking my office for spies. But I couldn't stop. Jesus was too real, his love too strong. I'd lead secret Bible studies with Raza and Hussein, teaching them about grace and about forgiveness. One night, Hussein said, "Sir, you're different. You're not just a general, you're a man of God." His words hit me like a wave. I wasn't just hiding my faith. I was living it, even in the shadows. But the shadows were closing in. One evening, Arlette and I sat in our kitchen, the boys asleep. She took my hand, her eyes serious. "Hamid," she said, "they're watching you. I feel it." My stomach twisted. I'd sensed it too. The glances, the questions. "What do we do?" I asked. She squeezed my hand. "We trust Jesus," she said. "He's the way, even when the path is dark." I nodded, but fear gnawed at me. I thought of my men, my family, and my country. I'd sworn to protect them, but now I was protecting something bigger. My faith, my savior. I didn't know it then, but the fire was coming. A fire that would test everything I believed. The day my secret was exposed was the day I faced the ultimate trial of my faith. The air was thick with fear that September night in 2004. I stood in a small house surrounded by brothers and sisters in Christ, our voices low as we sang praises to Jesus. The room was dim, curtains drawn tight, the scent of tea and sweat hanging heavy. I was General Hamid Pourmand, a man who'd led soldiers in battle. But here I was just Hamid, a Christian clinging to the truth I'd lived with my secret faith for 14 years, balancing my love for Jesus with my duty to Iran. But that night, everything changed. The door crashed open, soldiers stormed in, and my world turned to fire. We were at a church conference, a rare gathering of believers from across Iran. Pastor Daniel led us, his voice steady as he spoke of Jesus' love. I felt alive, my heart full, surrounded by people who shared my faith. Arlette was home with our sons, Emmanuel and David, now 10 and 8, and I'd promised to be back by morning. But as we prayed, boots thundered outside. The door burst open, and soldiers poured in, their rifles glinting in the lamplight. Nobody moved. One shouted to my heart stopped. I knew the seamen, not my soldiers, but men like them, trained to obey and to suspect. They rounded us up, their faces hard, their voices sharp. I saw fear in my brother's eyes, but I stood tall, my general's instincts kicking in. "Stay calm," I whispered to the others. Inside, I was trembling. They searched us, tearing through bags, finding Bibles and hymnals. One soldier grabbed me, his grip tight. "You're General Pourmand?" he asked, his eyes narrowed. I nodded, my throat dry. "You're coming with us." They handcuffed me, the metal cold against my wrists, and led me out. I glanced back at Pastor Daniel, his face calm, his lips moving in silent prayer. As they pushed me into a van, I thought of Arlette, of my boys, and of Jesus' words. "I am the way, the truth, and the life." I clung to them, a lifeline in the dark. The van took me to Evin Prison, Iran's house of fear. The gates loomed like a monster's jaws, swallowing me whole. Inside, the air was cold, smelling of damp stone and despair. They shoved me into a cell, the door slamming shut with a clang that echoed in my bones. The cell was small, barely enough room to lie down, with a thin mattress and a bucket in the corner. I sank to the floor, my uniform dusty, my heart pounding. I thought of Arlette's face, her smile when we prayed together. I thought of Emmanuel's question, "Does Jesus love me?" I whispered, "Jesus, are you here?" The silence was heavy, but I felt a flicker of peace, like a candle in the wind. Days blurred into nights. The guards interrogated me, their voices sharp, their questions like knives. "Why did you betray Islam?" One demanded, his breath hot on my face. "You're a general, a Muslim, and you follow this Christian nonsense." I wanted to shout that Jesus was no nonsense, that he was the truth, but I stayed quiet, my lips trembling. They knew I was a convert, and in Iran, that was a crime. Apostasy could mean death. I thought of my boys, of Arlette's prayers, and prayed silently. "Lord, give me strength." Once, a guard threw my Bible to the floor, its pages scattering. I wanted to cry, but I held still, remembering Jesus' words. "Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake." I wasn't alone. He was with me. The worst part was thinking of my family. Arlette and the boys were ordered to leave our military housing, their lives upended because of me. I imagined them in a tiny apartment, Arlette trying to explain why I was gone. I pictured Emmanuel's bruised face from years before, when kids called him a dirty Christian. Now they'd suffer more because of my faith that my heart broke, tears falling as I prayed in the dark. "Jesus, protect them," I whispered. "They don't deserve this." But even in my pain, I felt him, a warmth in my chest, like his hand on my shoulder. I remembered my dream from 1990, Jesus saying, "Follow me." I'd chosen him then, and I'd choose him now, no matter the cost. Asterisk in February 2005, they took me to a military court in Tehran. The room was cold, the judge's face hard as stone. They accused me of deceiving the army, saying I'd hidden my conversion to hold my rank. I wanted to scream that my superiors knew, that they'd exempted me from Ramadan fasting, but the evidence was ignored. I stood there, my uniform gone, just a man in a worn shirt, my hands cuffed. The judge read the verdict. 3 years in prison, discharged from the army, my pension stripped. My family would lose everything. Our home, our security. That I thought of Arlette's voice. "Jesus is worth it." Tears burned my eyes. I nodded, accepting the sentence, knowing I wasn't alone, but the fire wasn't over. They sent me back to Evan, and soon I faced a second trial, this time in Bandar Bushehr for apostasy and proselytizing. These charges were worse. Death was the penalty under Iran's Sharia law. They drove me to the court. I stared out the window, the desert blurring past. I thought of my boys growing up without me. I thought of Arlette, her prayers my only comfort. That I in the courtroom, the air was heavy, the judge's eyes cold. They accused me of turning from Islam, of spreading Christian lies. That I stood tall, my voice steady. "I follow Jesus because he is the truth," I said. "He is the way to God." The room went silent, and I felt peace, like Jesus was standing beside me. The trial was a blur of questions and accusations. They brought up my secret church, my baptism of Hussein, the soldier I'd led to Christ. I didn't deny it. How could I? Jesus was my savior, my everything. But fear gnawed at me. What if they took my life? What would happen to Arlette, to Emmanuel, and to David? I prayed through the nights, my knees sore on the cell floor, asking Jesus for a miracle. One day, a fellow prisoner, a Christian named Raza, not my soldier, but another convert, slipped me a torn Bible page. It was Psalm 23. "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." I clutched it, tears falling, and sang it in my heart, my voice too weak to speak. On May 28, 2005, the judge in Bandar Bushehr gave his verdict. I stood, my legs trembling, expecting death. But he said something I'll never forget. "No charges apply under Sharia law. I acquit you." He looked at me, his voice strange, almost kind. "I don't know who you are, but apparently, the rest of the world does." I didn't understand then, but I learned later that people across the globe, Christians, human rights groups, were praying for me, speaking my name. I felt Jesus' hand in that moment. A miracle I couldn't explain. That I was sent back to Evan to serve my 3 years, but I was alive. I wept, thanking Jesus, knowing he'd saved me. Asterisk prison was a crucible. The days were long, the nights endless. The guards mocked me, calling me a traitor and spitting on my food. But I found moments of grace. One night, a guard, younger than the others, slipped me a piece of bread when I was hungry. "What?" I asked, my voice weak. He shrugged, looking away. "You don't seem like a criminal." I saw Jesus in that act, in the kindness of a stranger. I shared my faith with prisoners, whispering about Jesus when the guards weren't listening. One man, a thief named Ollie, listened, his eyes wide. "Does Jesus love even me?" he asked. I nodded, tears in my eyes. "He loves us all." Ollie prayed with me that night, and I felt Jesus's love fill the cell, brighter than the darkness, the hardest. Moments were thinking of my family. I got letters sometimes, smuggled in by a kind guard. "Arlatrode, we're okay, Hamid. The boys miss you, but we pray for you every day." I'd hold her words, my fingers tracing her handwriting, and cry. I missed Emmanuel's law and David's questions. I missed Arlette's touch, her voice praying over me. But her letters reminded me of Jesus' promise. "I am with you always." Matthew 28 verse 20. That I clung to that, singing hymns in my heart when the guards couldn't hear. Amazing Grace became my anthem, its words a shield against despair. Those listening. I know pain. Maybe you've lost something, your home, your family, your hope. Maybe you don't know Jesus, but you feel the weight of a world that doesn't understand you. I was there, in a cell, stripped of everything, facing death for my faith. But Jesus was my strength, my light in the darkness. That he's not just astery. He's alive, holding you when you break. If you're searching, if you're hurting, turn to him. He carried me through Evan, through trials, and through fear. He's the way, the truth, and the life, and he's worth every tear. The gates of Evan prison creaked open in 2007, and I stepped into the sunlight, a free man. After 3 years of darkness, my heart pounded, not from fear, but from a joy I could barely contain. I was no longer General Hamid, poor man, the soldier, with medals and rank. I was just Hamid, a child of God, broken and rebuilt by his love. As I walked out, I saw Arlette waiting, her face worn but radiant. Our sons, Emmanuel and David, now 13 and 11, clung to her sides. Their eyes met mine, and I ran to them, tears streaming as I pulled them into my arms. Jesus had carried me through the fire, and now he was giving me a new mission, to live for him, to share his love, no matter the cost. That first embrace outside Evan felt like a miracle. Arlette's arms were warm, her tears soaking my shirt. "You're home," she whispered, her voice breaking. Emmanuel and David hugged me tight, their small bodies trembling.